Handheld gaming is everywhere, and that's brilliant news for busy dads like me or anyone who doesn't have hours to sink in front of their TV. Having reviewed my fair share of these over the past year or so, I thought it might be time to take a step back and offer a casual gamer's perspective on the handheld gaming landscape. And we're going to start where I began, which is arguably one of the most revolutionary gaming consoles ever made, the Nintendo Switch. Let's not forget that the predecessor to the Nintendo Switch was the Nintendo Wii U, which was by all accounts a commercial failure for Nintendo, and it really put them on the brink in terms of whether they could continue to deliver the kind of gaming experience that could keep up with the likes of Xbox and PlayStation. And honestly, with some of the most recent titles like the new Legends of Zelda game and various Pokemon games across its history, it really does struggle to keep up in terms of frame rates and performance. But the fact that I can mention those two titles and even the most casual gamers out there recognize them as household names says everything that you need to know about the Nintendo Switch library. By now there are so many Super Mario Bros. Games, Pokemon games, some of the best Zelda games you're ever going to play. Going through that Switch library now as a beginner would take you another decade to really get the most out of it. And I actually think that a lot of people are going to pick up the original Switch on sale and basically skip the next generation anyway. One significant challenge for Nintendo over the tenure of the Nintendo Switch has been with its Joy-Cons. On the face of it, a really innovative idea. Two controllers that can be easily taken off from either side of the device or used as their gyroscopic controls and can be incredible amounts of fun. But critically, they've been prone to a lot of drift problems. I myself have been through 2 or 3 pairs of Joy-Cons just because the controller has, for some reason, started drifting to the left. If you are really frustrated with the default hardware of the Switch, the cool thing is that there is also a huge third-party market of accessories. Take for example the Nitro Deck and the Nitro Deck Plus, which have been developed by a company called Cracked. This is a controller/dock that you can simply slide your Nintendo Switch into, and it gives you access to much more comfortable grips as well as Hall effect triggers that are going to be much less likely to go faulty in the future. And there's a lot of other cool features with controllers like the Nitro Deck Plus: mappable and customizable back buttons, alternative joystick layouts, and a much sturdier kickstand are just a few examples of innovations that the third party have brought to the Nintendo Switch. The real shame of the Nintendo Switch is that if you want to play online, it still relies on very poor network features. There is a subscription that allows you to have access to some legacy Nintendo titles from systems like the Super Nintendo, but gaming online always feels a little bit sluggish and unstable. In games like Pokemon, it can lead to internet dropouts, which actually drop your rank in the listings. And if you're playing a game like Fortnite, you're not going to have the same voice chat controls as somebody playing on another system, so that is really frustrating too. With that in mind, it's really interesting to see how Sony have taken such a different approach to handheld gaming that is actually entirely based on your internet connection. So let's take a look at the PlayStation Portal. If you have a PlayStation 5 lying around but you don't necessarily have access to the TV all the time, you're going to want to make the most of Remote Play. Remote Play is a feature that allows you to stream from your PlayStation to just about any device these days. You can play it on a mobile phone, a tablet, or even the PlayStation Portal. So for around $200 or pounds, you'll be able to pick up a PlayStation Portal, and essentially it's just a DualSense controller with an 8-inch LCD panel slapped in the middle. When the PlayStation Portal launched, I got a lot of comments asking why loads of YouTubers were playing Spider-Man 2 on it. The main reason people were focusing on that game is because as a PlayStation 5 exclusive, it really made the most of those haptic controls. And that is the big differentiator between something like the PlayStation Portal and playing your PlayStation Remote Play through something like a Steam Deck. I don't think any game exemplifies this more than Astro Bot, which is definitely one of the games of the year. But you absolutely want to play it with a DualSense controller because it makes such excellent use of the haptics. And playing it on the PlayStation Portal, you actually get a really faithful version of the game. You do definitely miss out on that kind of interaction between the controller sound and the TV sound, which is a big part of Astro Bot's audio engineering, but you still get that amazing immersive precision with the haptics and the rumble features, where it will change depending on the kind of terrain you're walking across. And it's a real joy playing Astrobot on the PlayStation Portal. Because yeah, while there are lots of different options for remote play, you're only really going to get that truly unique PlayStation experience playing it on the PlayStation Portal. That's especially because although this is not an OLED device like we come to expect these days, the 8-inch LCD panel is really vibrant and beautiful, and you only have to play it for a short while to see how spectacular images look on this screen. It's also much more plug and play than many of those other options. I've even seen stories of people stranded in hotels who've gone to the local Walmart, picked up a PlayStation Portal, and been able to set it up remotely from their hotel room. It's also massively outstripped PlayStation's own expectations for how many copies of this they would sell. And I think it's because so many people like me with a busy lifestyle, maybe kids or a spouse who wants to use the TV, have bought a PlayStation 5 more out of hope than any real expectation to actually game, and the PlayStation Portal actually gives them a way to access those titles like Spider-Man 2. The major stumbling block is of course whether you have a good internet connection or not. You cannot play this offline in any way. But if you do have stable Wi-Fi, you can really get a good connection, and it's definitely the smoothest version of remote play that I've ever seen. There is going to be some kind of difference in the way frame rates run on the PlayStation 5 itself and what is able to be passed through remote play, which can cause stuttering on some games if you're panning really quickly. But I don't think a lot of people who are casual gamers especially are really going to notice this. It is also worth saying that PlayStation continue to release updates which do improve this performance, and they've added in some much needed features. For example, the ability to go through captured network Wi-Fi, whatever you want to call it. When you're in a hotel or an airport, you have to put in your email address to get access. You couldn't do that when the PlayStation Portal launched. Now you can do it, and it's a really big upgrade. Another disappointing factor with the PlayStation Portal is the fact that it doesn't support Bluetooth. Now it does have a headphone jack, but if you want a wireless audio experience, you're going to have to pick up a pair of Sony's Link technology headphones, which are either the Pulse Elites or the Pulse Explorers. Now in my testing, I quite liked both of these pairs of headphones, but I was still really disappointed with some aspects of both of them. For example, the inability to switch off this blue LED that just shines into your eye the whole time on the Pulse Elite headset. And yeah, it is fair to say that if you don't care about those rumble features, you can recreate remote play really smoothly on a range of other devices, including your phone. So let's take a look at the world of stereoscopic controllers and how they could bring your PlayStation and many other systems to life from your iPhone or your Android device. These stereoscopic controllers are essentially gaming controllers that will just snap onto your phone and turn it into a gaming device. They come in loads of different shapes or sizes, but I think one of the brands that have really popularized this form factor is the Backbone, with the Backbone 1. They even have a PlayStation themed version that looks like a DualSense controller, which is really nice if you do want to use this for remote play. And of all the different controllers I've tried, I would say that this is the most portable. It snaps down into a really pocketable size that you can throw into pretty much any bag. There is also a case available if you want to put forward a little bit of extra money to get that truly premium experience. For someone like me who's got slightly bigger hands and has actually suffered a few breakages in their hand and wrist over the past couple of decades, actually having a controller that's this small is a little bit difficult for me to use over a long period. At the same time, I can acknowledge it's got a really high build quality. The buttons are very satisfying to press, and you can have a really great little gaming experience using this on your phone. But one thing that doesn't really sit right with me is that they do have this premium app subscription, which means that if you want to get full access to all of its features, then you will have to actually pay a certain amount every month. And for both of those reasons, the controller that I actually use the most is the GameSir G8 Galileo. Now this is designed to feel much more like a console controller. It's a bit bulkier, it's not going to fit as easily in your bag, but it's going to give you a really comfortable ergonomic experience. Something about this form factor just makes it feel a lot sturdier as well. You'll notice that the back panel is a lot flatter and larger, so it's going to be a bit more protective, especially of larger phones. And it comes with some other premium features, like for example swappable faceplates and a range of different joysticks that you can plug in and out. GameSir have also released a slightly more premium version of this called the GameSir G8 Plus, and that is a Bluetooth version, so it's not going to plug into your phone directly. So you can actually use it for anything from the Nintendo Switch to an iPad mini and get a great experience out of it. If you want a slightly cheaper version of this, you could look at the EasySMX M15, which actually has tactile face buttons, which gives a really satisfying click when you are playing games, but is otherwise pretty much a clone of the GameSir G8 Galileo, if we're being honest. But the biggest game changer in this space in recent memory has arguably been the decision for Apple to open up their App Store to game emulation. This means that you're not just restricted to things like Apple Arcade or streaming from your home console in order to enjoy gaming on the device. You can actually download an app like RetroArch and plug in your ROMs from a whole host of other systems and turn your iPhone into a PSP if you really want to. If emulation is something you really want to get into though, there are so many retro handhelds out there which will allow you to do this now. Maybe like me, you've still got your original Game Boy or Game Boy Advance SP lying around the house. But if you go and pick it up, you'll really realize some of the limitations in today's day and age. The screens are so dark, it's really difficult to see, especially outside. Finding one of those old chargers can be a hassle, and battery life is really poor compared to modern day machines. So it makes sense that people are searching out these retro handhelds to boot up ROMs of their favorite emulators. But actually, you don't even need to do that, because there are systems like the Analogue Pocket which will allow you to actually emulate the hardware instead of the software. This means all those old cartridges you've got knocking about your house from Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, they can now just go straight into something like the Analogue Pocket, and you can have a really premium version of that Game Boy you loved from when you were a kid. The Analogue Pocket is definitely an expensive option, but it's also my personal favorite handheld. There's still no better gaming experience than picking up one of my old Pokemon cartridges, booting it up on the Analogue Pocket, and just looking at the splendor of seeing that game in such a beautiful display. And if you're lucky to pick up one of the amazing color options that it's got, it can just feel like a really beautiful experience using this handheld. Now, some people aren't a huge fan of the D-pad. I find it to be perfectly in order, and I actually like the responsiveness of the A and B buttons, and I really do appreciate that battery life, which can get up to 10 hours if you're playing a very simple to run game. One thing I haven't personally picked up but is definitely worth considering is that it has a dock for your TV. It can connect to one of the OG link cables, which means you can trade from your old Game Boy and actually complete the Pokédex. And while the software experience is very basic, I actually think that it's really easy to navigate and it makes a lot of sense, especially if you do want to get into the digital emulation side of things. This is one of the easier systems in terms of actually getting ROMs that you want to play onto an SD card and then onto your Pocket. One hugely frustrating thing about the Analogue Pocket, if you don't live in the US, is shipping and duty fees, which are going to be added on if you actually take one of these out. So on the face of it, while the price point may seem affordable to you, really dig into the detail depending on where you live, because it could end up being very expensive. And for that reason, actually, for a lot of people, digital emulation might make a bit more sense, especially because you can now go onto AliExpress and pick up a really capable gaming device for about $30 or $40. And basically it's going to come with loads of games preloaded on. The ethics and the morals of this is something that you obviously want to question for yourself. But if you do want to, you can simply remove all of those games and put in a fresh SD card, which only contains backups of your original copies. In any sense, a handheld device like the Powkiddy V10 is going to give you a pixel perfect recreation of the Game Boy Advance system, admittedly with some questionable UX choices on the actual software, but generally for this price point you can't really complain, and these things make excellent gifts to anybody who wants to get into handheld gaming. To list all of these different devices would be exhaustive, and to be honest, the main thing that you really should take away from this is that pretty much everything I've spoken about so far can be done on a much more advanced device like a handheld PC. And to be honest, if I had to choose one device out of this whole list, the Steam Deck would come really close. Specifically, I would take a look at the Steam Deck OLED, which has a phenomenal 7.4-inch OLED display. Essentially, the Steam Deck is a handheld PC, but because it runs on Linux and Steam OS, which by now has been really well developed by the Valve team, it's the most seamless way to get into PC gaming, let alone handheld gaming. If you already have games in your Steam library from back when you actually had time for gaming, then you can download them and get them onto your Steam Deck really easily. The menus in SteamOS are very easy to navigate, so if you want to lock your screen at certain FPS up to 90, then you can absolutely do that very easily. But to be honest, the Steam system itself is going to take a lot of the second guessing out of getting those settings in place, and the community on sites like Reddit is so strong that people are very happy to share the optimum settings for every game you actually want to play. Thanks to software like EmuDeck, the Steam Deck can be an emulation beast and can emulate pretty much any system that you would want to play with really brilliant performance. And it can play PC games, including some AAA titles, all the way up to like Baldur's Gate 3, very well indeed. The gaming experience is going to differ from game to game because you will run into the limits of the system at some point. And for me, I absolutely love it for playing like indie games on Steam. Games like Planet of Lana or Highland Song have been real standouts for me. And the game that I'm sinking the most time into at the moment is Shogun Showdown, which just feels like is absolutely made for the Steam Deck. While not as comfortable as something like the PlayStation Portal, in my opinion, it is a really comfortable middle ground compared to something like the Legion Go, which is very big and unwieldy for a lot of people. I've personally got a D-brand kill switch case on mine, which makes it feel even more comfortable, has this lovely grippy texture on it, and even has this really handy travel face plate, which means you can essentially turn it into a full case that goes in your bag and protects the screen from getting scratched. And of course, if you do want to expand your Steam Deck gaming session to something like a TV or a desktop monitor, you can absolutely do that as well by plugging it in via a dock. Now, as great as SteamOS is, it does have its limitations. Certain games just aren't available on the Steam store, either because they have anti-cheat software involved which doesn't play well with Linux, or just because the developers want to release them on their own stores. But if you do want to break away from that, then there are other options in the handheld PC market, and the one that I have personally got a lot of enjoyment out of is the Legion Go. It feels like we've come full cycle at this point because the Legion Go just looks like a big overpowered Nintendo Switch. It's got two removable Joy-Con style controllers that can actually snap off and turn into a bit of a mouse. When these are removed, the Legion Go just feels like a big Windows tablet, and basically that's what it is. It's kind of its strength and also its biggest weakness. We recently went to France for 3 weeks, and I actually took this as an all-in-one device and left my iPad at home because I knew that I could use it to watch football matches on, get access to VPNs, all that kind of stuff, but also use it to play through some games when I got a chance. Now, it's not going to have the super dark blacks of the Steam Deck, but having such a big canvas to play on really makes a difference for certain titles. I basically use this as my Twilight Struggle machine, which is a board game that I absolutely love playing online with my friends, and having it on this beautiful crisp display just makes everything pop and feel so immersive. Part of being a dad is that you have to put games down very often, so over the past few years I've definitely really been drawn into these turn-based tactical games, and having these big maps up on screens like this for games like Valkyria Chronicles as well has been absolutely fantastic. But if you're not really prepared to slog through all the different manual settings you need to apply in Windows to actually get this up to speed, then it can be really frustrating too. The built-in audio equalization is really poor, so this thing is going to sound terrible until you really address that in the settings. And it's very loud as well. It can really pump out some volume with those fans. So this is definitely one of the most idiocentric choices that you have available. And I would really recommend you check out my review of the device to fully get a picture of what it's like to pick up as a casual gamer. But I hope I've given you a really good overview of this entire handheld gaming space today. And I'm super excited to see how it develops as we head into the new year. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in a bit.